Now, ladies and gentlemen, I posted on my social sites that I have a proposal for reparations. Stick with me through this whole thing or you won't understand what I'm saying. I believe if you can demonstrate that you are progeny of a slave. I don't mean a recent immigrant who happens to be a minority. No. I'm talking about people of that sort. I'm talking about people. Then maybe you should get reparations. But who should pay them? So here's my proposal. The American people, even way back then, didn't all own slaves. The American people, even way back then, weren't all supportive of slavery. There was a civil war that was fought. Fought between two groups. One group, states' rights and slavery. Another group, federalism and anti-slavery. Now that's simplistic, but you get the point. Now which group was which? Did Abraham Lincoln support slavery? No. Did the Republican Party support slavery? Never. Did the Republican Party support segregation? No. Did the Republican Party support the Jim Crow laws in the South? No. Was the Klan an appendage of the Republican Party? No, it was an appendage of the Democrat Party. And every major civil rights bill after the Civil War in the 50s and 60s was opposed by a significant percentage of elected Democrats and supported by the majority, a significant majority of elected Republicans. So I support reparations, but I do not support the way in which the Kamala Harrises of the world and the Elizabeth Warrens in the world want to pay for it. The American people, through the tax system, shouldn't pay for reparations. The Democrat Party should pay for reparations. The Democrat National Committee, all the state parties, the Democrats should pay reparations to the distant children of slaves. Because the Democrat Party, the Democrats, well after the founding of this nation, well after the Declaration and the Constitution, when the country was trying to make things right, it was the Democrats who fought it. So the Democrat Party is the entity that supported slavery as an institutional matter. We have individuals who had slaves, but they didn't necessarily support the institution per se. Some did, some didn't. But the Democrat Party did. And supported segregation. And supported Jim Crow, at least a significant percentage of it. Not Republicans, and not all Americans. And I might remind Kamala Harris and Elizabeth Warren and all the rest that we fought a civil war of over 700,000 casualties to put an end to slavery. So as a theoretical matter and a practical matter, I'm really against reparations because an awful lot of people lost their lives, including a lot of white people, trying to eliminate slavery. But if we're going to have it, then the perpetrators, the perps, they should pay for it. Now, the question needs to be put to Kamala Harris, or as she likes to be called now, Kamala Harris, and Elizabeth Warren. The question should be put to them, will they support their party that perpetuated slavery, segregation, and Jim Crow in the South? Will they support their party funding reparations? Not everybody, not the general taxpayer, but the perpetrator. Now, let's take a look at a little history here. Let's take a look at a little history. HistoryNewsNetwork.org. Wayne Perryman, just an inner city minister in Seattle, author of Unfounded Loyalty. He wrote an editorial that I think kind of hits the nail on the head. He says most people are either a Democrat by design or a Democrat by deception. That is, either they were well aware the racist history of the Democrat Party and still chose to be Democrat, or they were deceived into thinking that the Democratic Party is a party that sincerely cared about black people. History reveals that every piece of racist legislation that was ever passed and every racist terrorist attack that was ever inflicted on African Americans as a group was initiated by the members of the Democratic Party. From the formation of the Democratic Party in 1792 to the Civil Rights Movement in the 1960s, congressional records show the Democrat Party passed no specific laws to help blacks. Every law that they introduced into Congress was designed to hurt blacks. In the 1894 Repeal Act. The chronicles of history show that during the past 160 years, the Democratic Party legislated Jim Crow laws, black codes, and a multitude of other laws at the state and federal level to deny African Americans their rights as citizens. History reveals the Republican Party was formed in 1854 to abolish slavery and challenge other racist legislative acts initiated by the Democratic Party. Some called it the Civil War, others the war between the states, but to the African American community at the time, it was the war between the Democrats and the Republicans over slavery. The Democrats gave their lives to expand it. Republicans gave their lives to end it. During the Senate debates on the Ku Klux Klan in 1871, it was revealed that members of the Democratic Party formed many terrorist organizations like the Klan to murder and intimidate African American voters. The Ku Klux Klan Act was a bill introduced by a Republican Congress to stop Klan activities. Senate debates revealed that the Klan was the terrorist arm of the then Democratic Party. History reveals that Democrats lynched, burned, mutilated, and murdered thousands of blacks and completely destroyed entire towns and communities occupied by middle-class blacks, including Rosewood, Florida, the Greenwood District in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Wilmington, North Carolina, to name a few. After the Civil War, Democrats murdered and several hundred black elected officials in the South to regain control of Southern government. All the elected officials up to 1935 were Republicans. As of 2004, the Democratic Party, the oldest political party in America, has never elected a black man to the United States Senate. The Republicans have elected 3. Now, of course, that's changed since this was written in 2004. But you get his point. History reveals it was Thaddeus Stevens, a radical Republican, that introduced legislation to give African Americans the so-called 40 acres and a mule, and Democrats overwhelmingly voted against the bill. Today, many white Democrats are opposed to paying African Americans trillions of dollars in reparation, money that should be paid by the Democratic Party. History reveals that it was abolitionists and radical Republicans such as Henry Morehouse and General Oliver Howard that started many of the traditional black colleges, while Democrats fought to keep them closed. Many of our traditional black colleges are named after white Republicans. Congressional records show it was Democrats that strongly opposed the passage of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. These 3 amendments were introduced by Republicans to end slavery, give citizenship to all African Americans born in the U.S., and give blacks the right to vote. Congressional records show that Democrats were opposed to passing the following laws that were introduced by Republicans to achieve all civil rights legally for African Americans. Civil Rights Act of 1866, the Reconstruction Act of 1867, the Freedmen Bureau Extension Act of 1866, Enforcement Act of 1870, Force Act of 1871, Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871, Civil Rights Act of 1875, Civil Rights Act of 1957, Civil Rights Act of 1960. And during the 60s, many Democrats fought hard to defeat the 64 Civil Rights Act, the 65 Voting Rights Act, and more. Court records show that it was the Democrats that supported the Dred Scott decision. The decision classified blacks and property rather than people. It's also the racist Jim Crow practices initiated by Democrats that brought about 2 landmark cases of Plessy versus Ferguson and Brown versus Board of Education. Now, I can go on and on, ladies and gentlemen. There's a very deep and sickening record with the Democrat Party. in our history. Wasn't the American people. Wasn't all the American people. There was a civil war for a reason. There were two sides for a reason. There were two parties for a reason. And if reparations are to be paid, they should be paid by the perpetrator, the institutional perpetrator, the Democrat Party.
Mark Levin.